Welcome to the Postpartum is Forever podcast. My name is Katura Stoltenberg. I am a mother of 2 young men and a postpartum doula. This podcast is dedicated to all mothers and is a place to hear honest, relatable conversations with the intention of helping mothers feel seen, heard, supported, and valued. I believe that postpartum is forever and that sharing our stories is a powerful way that we facilitate connection with ourselves, our children, and our community. Thank you for being here. This episode brings you an exhilarating conversation with Amy Taylor Kabbaz. Amy began her career as a dedicated ABC journalist and producer and was driven by her work for 15 years. She honestly believed that becoming a mother would not have any impact on her profession, until it did. In 2015, having brought herself to the edge of overwhelm and burnout, trying to prove that she could do it all, she stepped away from a lifelong dream of working for the ABC to dedicate herself completely to the understanding of motherhood. Amy knew that what she had been through was something that too many other mothers were experiencing. Her search path took her to the office of Doctor Aurelie Athan at Columbia University in New York, and Amy finally understood the answer she'd been seeking. It came in the form of a word. This word was matrescence. With the help of Dr. Athan and many other mentors, Amy has offered awareness, education and training to more than 5,000 mothers through her online programs, coaching events and her book, Mama Rising, Discovering the New You Through Motherhood. Amy believes that when mothers understand the milestones and markers of matrescence, they can navigate this time of their lives powerfully, without overwhelm, perfectionism and shame. This is a thought-provoking episode for all mothers because just as postpartum is forever, so matrescence is forever. Enjoy. Hello, Amy Taylor Kabbaz. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Hello, beautiful. So good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Most welcome. So tell us a little bit about your background and your pathway to motherhood, and maybe just touch on your experiences in birth and postpartum, because I know they all had pivotal moments for you.
Yes, well, I am a mama of 3. Scarlett, who is now 16, Greta, who is 14, and Cassius, or Cass, as we call him, who is 10. My gosh. Just last night, I was looking back through old photos for my social media content and got down this huge rabbit hole, Katura, of all these videos of when they were babies and almost crying because I was like, I can't believe that was so long ago and it feels like only yesterday. So my pathway into motherhood, I would describe as a bit of a crash landing into motherhood. I had just turned 30 and just got married and fell pregnant very quickly. And the way I approached it was I always wanted to be a mum. I didn't overthink it. Definitely wasn't a strongly maternal woman, but also, knew it would be part of what I would do because it's, part of the successful life as a woman list that I was ticking off. I really did approach it in that way. I thought it would almost be like something I added to my resume. Which sounds crass, but that's how much thought I put into it. I genuinely thought it wouldn't change my life, and it definitely wouldn't change me and who I am and my career, because at that time, my career was my whole identity. It's all I ever remember wanting to do was to be a journalist and a writer. I wanted to be a writer from the time I was probably 7, and decided to be a journalist in my teens. And in particular, I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, traveling to war zones in different parts of the world, covering stories, and in particular around women. I've always been a fierce, feisty feminist, as my father would call me. So by the time I got married and had my first baby, I was working at the ABC and was very, very focused on creating that legacy in telling stories and traveling the world as a journalist. And so when I landed in motherhood, I had a beautiful, easy pregnancy. In a way, a rough pregnancy might have prepared me a bit better, but I was blessed with a very easy pregnancy. So it was literally Labor Day, birthing my baby, where suddenly I found myself completely out of my depth. It was quite a traumatic birth, both physiologically, but especially mentally. And my beautiful first daughter was born with quite a few significant physical challenges. And so she wouldn't sleep and she wouldn't feed. And we were back at the hospital every day for the first 6 weeks of her life for physiotherapy. And in those 6 weeks, I just felt like I had broken and that I was failing. And I secretly questioned every day, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I shouldn't be a mum. I don't know how to do this. I don't think I want to do this. And I kept that very quiet because I put the mask of motherhood on and tried to pretend that I was okay. And outwardly, nobody really knew how much I was suffering. I wasn't one of those mums who struggle with tears. I struggled with anger. So the only sign that I wasn't okay was how quickly I would get angry. I wasn't, the emotional, teary postnatal depression. I was the rage. And so that was how I landed in this wild ride. We can talk about, what's happened since then, but it's 16 years on. And for those that are just listening to the audio, not the video, if you could see my chest right now, it's getting all red again. Because even 16 years later, talking about that, I have this sensation come back in my chest and my voice gets a bit shaky and my chest gets all hot because I still remember how terrified I was in those first few months of her life. Yeah, it was a big crash landing.
Thank you for sharing. And I'm sure many mothers can relate to that because for a lot of people, it is just the next milestone in their life, isn't it? It's just very, you grow up, you get married, you buy the house, and then you have a child. And
yeah, it's assumed.
And then what's also assumed is that you'll cope. You'll do this, you've got a demanding role at work. You're used to managing a lot of people. How hard can it be?
That's right. And I was the first one out of all my friends to have a baby. Most of my friends had them after me. And I grew up, my parents were both in the military. So we moved all the time. All my childhood, I was in different houses, in different states, in different schools. So I didn't grow up around cousins. I did not grow up around babies. It was basically my sister, my mum and I. It was the three of us and that was it. So when I brought my baby home, I literally had no idea what I was doing. It was like, oh, what?
What is this?
What is this? What do I do now? And it was 3 days later after I'd given birth, and this child was so unwell and so unhappy. And I was so unwell. I didn't know at the time I had the beginnings of what they first thought was postpartum thyroiditis and then developed into Hashimoto's. So, oh gosh, we were both just these two little lost souls, her and I, and it makes me emotional because we really struggled through that together. And we still do. Her and I, we're still struggling through life together, figuring this out together. But yes, there was no preparation in the sense of acknowledging what this would be for me. Like of course, there were baby books and I did, some simple breastfeeding classes, but no acknowledgement around what it would mean for myself and for my relationship and for my career and for my body and for my health. So at about 4 months old, Scarlett began to suddenly turn a corner. So she was born with severe congenital torticollis. So one side of her jaw had not developed. She couldn't turn her head at all. She could hardly open her mouth except to scream. But when she did that, it would really be incredibly painful. Her foot was pushed up against her shin, and her arm was not sort of in the right position either. So that we had to have this daily physio. She had to wear a cast. We had to move her head every hour. We had to wake her up and do her head exercises. And, you know, I mean, you don't wake a sleeping baby, right? But we had to wake this baby all the time and try and get her to move and do her exercises. But at about 4 months old, she suddenly turned this corner and she just turned into this beautiful, happy, smiley baby and started to finally feed and finally sleep and finally settle. But by that stage, it had been 4 months of this hell, to be totally honest, and something had sort of shifted in me permanently. There was this, what I think why I ended up changing my whole career and doing this work now is because that shift in me, that's the part that I still am determined to share with the world as much as I can. It's why I do what I do now and why the word matrescence changed my life, because from 4 months onwards, I kept waiting for me to feel like myself again. You know, she was suddenly feeding and sleeping and I went back to work and all of these things were happening around me. But I was like, but I'm not who I used to be and I don't know how to get that person back. I don't feel about the world like I used to. I don't feel about myself like I used to. I don't think I can do everything now. I don't know if I've got that much ambition. I'm not sure if this is the right path for me. All of these questions that were rising up, I kept waiting to be answered and to be, oh, Amy's back. Here I am. I'm the person I used to be with that go-getting attitude and that belief in myself that if I work hard enough, I'll get there. And I kept waiting and waiting, and that sense of self never came back. I know now that's because through matrescence, we never go back to who we used to be. And that can be a blessing because I found a different version of myself through this process. But I didn't know that at the time. And that sense of loss of myself was what drove me to then dive into all the questions that I've been asking ever since.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, so many women sort of are waiting for the next thing to happen, aren't they? They're waiting for the child to come out of something so that they can then find themselves again and get back to who they were, because it will happen just when this happens, just when they come out of that, you know, you've had a very challenging experience. But for others, it will be when they come out of that 6-week mark, when they finish the 4-month regression, when baby's crawling, walking, going to school, blah, blah.
Exactly. Or they wait to go back to work. I'll feel like myself when I go back to work. And that was for all 3 of my kids, it took until the 3rd one. I joked that the universe knew that I didn't learn my lesson the first 2 times. And so they sent me the surprise baby number 3, because it's like, this girl still hasn't got this lesson. We're going to have to send her another child. But after both of my first 2 children in particular, I kept thinking that if I could just get back to work and work to the capacity that I used to. So I was always in this sense of trying to catch up to being that superwoman again.
Yeah.
If I could just work full time again and then still be an awesome mum, then I'll finally be me. If I could just do all of this and all of that, then I'll finally be me. And like I said, it took the 3rd pregnancy for me to totally surrender and learn that lesson. But so many of us as mothers and as women, we have our version of that. We wait until we feel enough at work, or we lose the baby weight, or we get to go, you know, out on a date with our husbands again, or we have that 3rd baby, or we're always waiting for this future point where we feel like we are who we're meant to be again, and that just doesn't come. And there's grieving in that, and there's a process through that.
Yes, especially as you did and many women did, they identify themselves through their work or through their career. That is just who they are. And so, the forever chasing the old life.
Yes.
So When you came to the third postpartum, tell us a little bit more about that one, or, through your pregnancy. I think there was a few things too.
Yes. So I think because you speak so directly to women around postpartum, I wanted to share the second birth briefly, if I can, because that was such an empowering experience for me in so many ways compared to Scarlett's birth. So Greta was breech. And we tried turning her a couple of times. Now I know her personality. Of course, she was never going to turn around. She's always going to come out the way she wants to come out. And but it was the first time, Katura, that I found my voice in motherhood. So I was very lucky, and I know that a lot of women don't have this opportunity. But I birthed my first two babies in Adelaide at the Women's and Children's Hospital, and there is a breech expert at that hospital. So I was very lucky to just be in the right place with the right doctor. And secondly, because it was my second baby, they said, okay, you can give it a try. If it was my first baby, they would never have let me. So because I'd already delivered naturally, they said, yes, you can see how it goes. But my midwife told me that they'd had meetings and they were actually all just thinking that I'd have a cesarean, that I'd get to the hospital at 4 centimetres and it'd all just get a bit hard and they'd wheel me in. So, but it was the first time looking back, I advocated for myself. My husband did not want me to have a natural birth. He was just as traumatized by the first birth as I was. A lot of the people around me were saying, no, don't do it. Why would you? Just go for the cesarean. It's safer for everybody. I just had this sense of so much of that experience of first-time motherhood. So Scarlett was 2 when Greta was born, just 2. The first 2 years was so much of me feeling like I had lost myself, my power and my voice, that I dug my heels in with this. I was like, I don't care if in the end you have to cut my arms off and give me a cesarean to get this baby out. Please, could I just have a try? I just want to at least start. Just let me get to the birth, like to the labor naturally. And if, of course, things don't look good at the beginning, then let's do that. And I think looking back, you see these connecting dots through these experiences of postpartum and motherhood, where it's almost like little sliding door moments, I think, where with that one decision, with that one voice, with that one moment of me saying, no, please just let me have a go, something activated in me. And it was that moment where I began to feel a little bit, not like my old self, because I was never going to be like that again, but there was this belief in myself, makes me emotional, in myself, but also in my body. Because the other big thing that had happened in the first 2 years of motherhood for me was that I totally lost faith in my body. Not only was the birth a disaster, but then I got so sick with Hashimoto's for quite a long time. I really struggled to breastfeed. I couldn't keep my eyes open because I was so exhausted from my thyroid disease. I just felt like this body didn't do what it was meant to do. I'm a woman. I should be able to do all of this. And I just felt like I couldn't. So when they then told me, well, no, you can't have another natural birth, something just switched and I was like, no, I have to try. And I really wonder if I hadn't done that, where I would have ended up. I think that would have been, I really am looking back so proud that there was that little feisty voice that said, please let me have a go. And in the end, she was so fast and so feisty, because that's my daughter. She was nearly birthed in the car on the way to the hospital and came out breech quick as a flash. And it was really beautiful and empowering. But I just wanted to share that story with all of your listeners as well, because I think we have these moments, and I don't think it would have mattered if I ended up in a cesarean with her. It was just the way that I found my voice in this. And that's what I think we need to have for women through these experiences, is that as long as they feel like they're heard, then the outcome is almost irrelevant as long as everybody's healthy. But if that power is taken away from her before she has a chance to process it and speak what she wants, then that's when that's really lost. So then, a beautiful time postpartum, second baby. And then, as I said, I went straight back to work though, 9 months old, with both of my girls. I was back at work at 9 months. I don't think I've mentioned I worked in breakfast radio throughout all of this time. And so that meant that my alarm went off at 3:30 every morning to get to work by 4:15 to do the morning news. And when you go back to work at 9 months, I mean, like I was basically breastfeeding at 3 a.m. and then just heading out the door. So it's just wild. Like when I think about it now, I'm like, how did I do that? So just pushed myself straight back into the same old superwoman mentality. And then along came, surprise baby number 3. By that stage, we were living in Sydney. So we'd moved to Sydney for my husband's work, and I got a job here at the ABC in Sydney in breakfast radio. And no signs that anything wasn't okay. Both of my earlier pregnancies were straightforward. I never had any problems being pregnant. And then at, I think it was 26 weeks, I was at work and in my high heels, because, that's what you still do. That's who I was. And I remember grabbing like a fax from the fax machine, because it was breaking news coming through, and I put my hands on my belly and said, we knew it was a boy. And I said, okay, buddy, come on, we've got to run. And I ran into the studio, and then I stood there and I was like, oh, that feels weird. And within, I think, 3 hours, I was in labour. In the hospital. I have very small babies. I'm quite little. So at 26 weeks, he was incredibly small and was very at high risk of not surviving, really. He was very, very little. So I spent, in the end, 5 days in hospital with lots of drugs and steroids and everything they could to try and slow the labour down, which, thank goodness, they did. And I, in those moments, sat on the bed. I remember the doctors coming in and saying to me, the only reason this is happening is because of your lifestyle. You can't go back to work. You're going to have to sit on the couch until we get to a safe point. And I fought that tooth and nail. I actually rejected the medical advice and went and paid a fortune for a private obstetrician to also tell me exactly the same thing, which I hated. I cried to my boss. I tried to negotiate half days. I did everything I possibly could because I couldn't believe that I was unable to do it all. We were in the middle of a federal election, and I just believed that the ABC couldn't run without me. Like it was just such a core sense of who I was. But he had other ideas, my little guy. If I got off the couch and walked up the road to get the girls from school, contractions would start. So for 10 weeks, I was completely couch bound, daily progesterone inserted in to keep the cervix as thick as possible. It didn't really work, but yes, finally got to 36 weeks and they said you can get off the couch and stop the progesterone. And I think he was born 72 hours later. Right. And he was tiny. He was 5 pounds. I think it was just 5 pounds. Yeah. And he came out looking like an old Lebanese man. We joked that he was like Benjamin Button. He was born backwards. And that was the next big lesson of motherhood for me was, why can't I slow down? Even when things were so scary and risky, I still struggled so much. And I think the bigger question for me in all of that was, why is being a mother not enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to look back at the experiences of motherhood and think that I had these 2 moments of asking questions. One was after Scarlett was born, which is, what's happened to me? Where did I go? And the second one was after Cass was born, well, while I was trying to keep Cass not to be born, which is, why can't I slow down? Why is being a mother not enough? And those 2 questions have really guided everything I've done since over the last decade. So that's my long story.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly such a valuable story, though, and teaches us a lot, doesn't it? We're always learning from our children. They're always teaching us something. It's just whether we are courageous enough to listen. So
I like that you say it like that, because it does take courage to listen. And that's what I meant earlier about how the universe had to send me the third baby, because I wasn't listening, Katrina. Like, I was unwell. I was really unwell for a long time. I was so burnt out. I did not listen to my body. I was so tired all the time. Oh my God. I never saw my husband. I didn't have any balance in my life, but I was so scared to ask those questions of myself and listen to the answers. The answers meant, I don't think I want to do this anymore. The answers meant change. It meant giving up my career that I've built my whole damn life on. The answer meant the realization of, oh my gosh, my beautiful teacher, who we'll talk about in a moment, Doctor Aurelie Athan, when I was working with her really intimately, she said to me something along the lines of, Amy, it sounds like you built the mansion and then ended up living in there with no furniture, looking around saying, what am I doing in here? This isn't what I thought it would be like. And that image just landed so much. It's like I built the castle of what I thought this life was meant to be like. And then I looked around and all the rooms are empty. There's nothing in here. That's what it felt like. And that was a scary realization.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
What are we scared of? Is it the letting go of our identity? Is it thinking that we've put so much effort, time and work into this, it can't fail because we think it was seen as failure?
I think each of us have our own version of those answers. For me personally, it was absolutely this sense of, if I am not that, then who am I? What I know now to be true, as Oprah would say, is that I believed I knew who I was. I didn't at all. I just created this persona of this journalist and this successful woman. That's not really me. That was just the stereotype of the successful woman I thought I needed to be. But in that time of my life, I truly and deeply believed that that was my truth. And I think since then, I've coached hundreds, thousands of women, and some of them don't resonate with my story at all because they weren't attached to their career. Their identity wasn't that, but a different identity was challenged through motherhood. So I don't want to be like my mother. I don't want to end up the way that kind of relationship worked out. And then they see something in themselves through the experience of motherhood and they don't want to face that. So there's so many different versions of what we're brought to our knees by in this. But I think what we're afraid of is the truth on the other side of that. And as you know, because you've done Mama Rising and the training, I believe that that's the true gift of Matrescence, is that it forces us. We don't always then take the answers we find, but it does force us, whether we like it or not, to look at some really confronting parts of ourselves. And I feel like that's the ultimate purpose of this, is that this will bring the mirror to us and show us what we probably don't want to see. What we do with that is each individual's decision, but I haven't met a mother yet who hasn't had that mirror in front of her through motherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it will come, as you've just said. It's that we can stall it, we can delay it, we can pretend it doesn't exist, but there will be a time when we feel cracked open, so to speak, and left with the reality of, who am I now?
Yes.
And for some mothers, they, like I think you've mentioned, they feel as though they've found themselves in motherhood.
Yes.
Some feel that way. Others feel that they've lost themselves in motherhood. I think I found myself, lost myself, and then found myself again.
Yes. Well, because it's the way of the feminine, right? So the feminine works in cycles. We think we've figured it out and then we lose it again and we come back. And I love that you've said that, because, I mean, I am the perfect example of the feminist child, the child of the very strong feminist upbringing, and therefore was given a very clear mandate that motherhood would not define me. But there are other generations, other families, other cultures, other stories that women are told motherhood will be your defining moment. That is what you're here for. You are here to be a mother. And then you've got the spectrum in between. Like then we've got all the different versions of that. And wherever we are on that spectrum, I think, isn't that interesting? It's almost like wherever we are on that spectrum, our job is to continuously check in to see how much we're attaching ourselves to this.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you and I both have older children now. Yours is older than mine. But, you know, even with the 16-year-old, like I keep going back into this over attachment, over connection to whether she's okay. How am I going to redesign my life to make sure that she's safe, all of these different things. And then I have to come back to this reminder that she is her own soul. And so we go round and around and around this version. And I've had the privilege of coaching women whose children have left home. And it is then that their biggest identity crisis kicks in. Like, I have built my whole life around being a mother. Now what? So it gets us sooner or later. We can't avoid it.
It does. And I've got one child that's left home too. So I fully appreciate that and would love to delve deeper into that in another episode because it's another huge topic.
It's huge. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think a lot of the time we don't want to be, inverted commas, just a mum because society doesn't value mothers.
That's right.
And so I think a lot of mothers, if they do decide, for instance, to say become a stay-at-home mum, they want to be the absolute perfect version of themselves because that is their identity now.
That's right.
So we're always thinking we need to strive to reach some sort of mark that equals good enough or perfect.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So of course, at some point we can't juggle anything perfectly. So at some point it's going to hit us, and maybe even more so for the mothers that are staying at home because they're like, well, this is what I do. And this is not even working smoothly. So what can I do? Now I must be failing.
Yes. And I've heard that so many times in all my years of coaching of the mothers that are at home. Exactly what you beautifully just said. How can I be failing at this? I'm just a mum. Like, this is what I've chosen. I don't even have a job and I can't seem to be on top of it. But I also find that they're often the women who have overcommitted to everything else as well. They are running the school canteen. They're doing the fundraisers on the weekends. They're probably picking up other kids from school because the working mums can't do it. They're running the soccer team. They're doing it because, again, being the mum is not enough.
That's it.
And so at the very core of all of this, it's acknowledging the carer's role. And in our society, we don't do that. And 99.9999% of the time, it falls to the woman. And we're either caring for our children or caring for our parents, caring for our friends, caring for our neighbours. And all of that is invisible. Yeah. All of that is not valued, seen, acknowledged, appreciated. And that is what I think is where we're heading, especially post-COVID, is that we've acknowledged that the carers in our community, teachers, nurses, doulas, midwives, parents, grandparents, all of these things, all of these amazing roles, if we just keep taking them for granted and not acknowledging and supporting them, it will fall apart. We have to do this better for all of the carers in our community. Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
We really do. We really do one day. Mm.
Yeah. So you're a matrescence educator.
Yes.
I learnt about matrescence through you, which I'll be forever grateful for. It's meant, it changes everything. It gives you back the ability to see why you're feeling the feelings you are and that it's not your fault.
Mm.
So what can you tell the listeners who maybe haven't even heard of this word before? What would be a simpler explanation of what matrescence is?
So matrescence is, at its core, a description of a period of transition and change that a woman goes through as she becomes a mother and continues to be a mother. So it's not just a postpartum experience, it's an ongoing experience. And the best way to describe it is matrescence is like adolescence. So adolescence, of course, acknowledges the hormonal changes and the physical changes, but thank goodness we now also understand that there's psychosocial changes. There is the question of society, there's slamming doors, there's rebellion, there's, finding out where they belong in the world. It's pulling away from your parents to find your own sense of identity, but it wasn't that long ago that we didn't understand adolescence like we do.
Mm.
And once we had that framework, we could finally support teenagers differently. That's what Matrescence ultimately is here to do. We all hope, all of us Matrescence activists, is that we hope that we work towards a framework that understands that, of course, yes, there's hormonal changes and physical changes that a woman goes through in motherhood, but there's also all of those identity changes as well. There's her economic status. There's the way she feels about her partner, her friends, her community, her culture. It's the way she's treated by her community and her culture and her workplace. All of these layers of change that happen through motherhood. And the part that excites me the most, as you can hear from the conversation already, is this acknowledgement of her inner change, her sense of self, and her huge identity crisis. Because there is that question of, who am I now? How do I feel about being a mum? Am I good enough? Am I good if I go back to work, or should I stay home? How do I do all of this? All of those questions lead to this sense of identity crisis. And just like adolescence, you'll never go back to being a child. Matrescence, you'll never go back to being the person you were before you became a mother. And it's really important to add here that each pregnancy is another matrescence experience. So women who experience pregnancy loss, miscarriage, fertility treatments, all of that, there is now amazingly, excitingly acknowledgement that matrescence includes that. It is hormonal, physical, social, economic, spiritual changes through each and every one of those experiences.
Yeah.
It's life-changing.
It really is.
Changing.
It is, and that it's just such a powerful and beautiful word. And I think we all need that. We all need to know that, okay, there's a reason for this. And when we liken it to adolescence, it makes a lot of sense. And we know adolescence is a rite of passage. We know that it's a developmental milestone.
Yes.
And yet we, like you said, not even that long ago, we didn't recognise that, but now we do. And so we make space. We kind of give a little bit of leeway to teenagers. We support them. We have a network around us. We have, support structures. But this is another rite of passage and another developmental milestone, and it's way larger.
Absolutely. Yes.
Brain changes are even so much more broader than even during adolescence. So this woman is trying to come to terms with, like you said, who she is, her identity.
While she's also figuring out how the hell her nipples meant to get into that baby's mouth. This is why it's so wild.
Yes.
Yeah. It is wild that we don't acknowledge what this is.
In there.
That's it, that there is this human being trying to understand how now to keep another human being alive mostly without many people around her to help. Like if you're privileged and blessed enough to have a postpartum doula like you to step in and support her after birth, then wow, you're off to a better start than most. But the reality is that most of us take our babies home on our own, and we're lucky if we have family around, because we birth away from our villages nowadays. We often don't live where our parents live, or our parents still work. We are doing this in isolation. We're sending her home at the beginning of one of the biggest transitions of her life, and handing her a baby and saying, go for it, because you were born female, you know how to do this. You've got this. Just trust your intuition. Oh, makes me so angry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We're not born with intuition.
We are not, especially if we're not around the village of mothers that we would have been 100 years ago. Like I said before, there was no intuition within me at all about how to be a mother. None at all. I literally looked at this baby. I may as well have been holding a baby crocodile. I had no idea what to do.
Yeah.
But everybody around me said, trust yourself. Trust yourself.
Yeah.
You'll know what to do. Trust yourself.
Listen
And I
to
remember
your gut.
screaming in my head saying, I don't have any intuition for this. I have no mother instinct. So yeah, that's what Matrescence is, the umbrella really of all of the wild and wonderful changes that we experience through motherhood. And my hope and our hope in the work that we do is that through the education of Matrescence, we really begin to see value and support mothers differently. And the exciting thing is that not only are we doing that in that very early period of time postpartum, but this conversation is opening doors in corporate, in government, in policy, because even the most closed off male corporate board member understands what adolescence is.
Yeah.
And so therefore now we have this gift, which came from my teacher, Doctor Aurelie Athan, of this acknowledgement that matrescence is like adolescence. We can now finally open those doors and say, hey, this is actually a thing and we need to do it better. And that's happening in small ways, but it's happening.
I trust you are enjoying this episode. I know that if you are listening to this podcast, you are likely a woman who deeply cares about her mothering practices. I invite you to sign up to my email list found on my website, motherhoodwithkatura.com.au, for semi-regular emails that include blogs, recipes, and information relating to a variety of motherhood topics. If you are pregnant or know someone who is, head over to my website and sign up to receive your free copy of the postpartum checklist and important contacts list. And so that we can get these conversations out to more mothers, I'd be grateful if you could like, share, and review this podcast. It really does make a difference. Back to the episode.
I'd just like to share with you as well is an experience I had of one of the guests on the podcast. She's had 3 miscarriages, including one of them was a medical termination in 1 year. And she's in the construction industry. And of course, that's a pretty hardcore industry that's very masculine, and there wouldn't be a lot of understanding about what a woman goes through. And she had a little conversation with me when she came in to get a massage in her she's got 1 child, so in that pregnancy. And I had introduced her to the term matrescence. And what I didn't realise is that a couple of years later, she's still so inspired by the conversation that we had that she retrained to become a postpartum doula. I'm trying to get her to do the matrescence education. And she now offers that through her workplace, which has been approved by, there wasn't even a HR there. And yet she came into work after, I think, each of her miscarriages, because she thought, well, I don't have a baby in my arms, so I've got to come back to work. But she kept thinking about those conversations that we'd had, and she was like, this is not right. This is not normal that women are coming in, not talking about what's happening, being silent because they're too scared to say that, they've had that disruption in their life. So they're coming back to work, and she thought, this is wrong. I feel like she's still in her job, but she's also she's a doula and a support person to the women within her workplace, within the industry, that might be coming back after miscarriage or coming back after maternity leave, so she can make the process a lot smoother, changing policies and changing the way they handle back to workplace arrangement.
It's amazing. It's happening.
Amazing. And then what she did tell me, which surprised me, is some of the guys are coming up to her and saying, could we have a little chat, because we've just been through a miscarriage and I'm not sure how to handle it, and I'd like to support my wife better. And it's just had this real flow and effect, and it's beautiful. And I thought it was quite incredible in that industry to be, and she's a very vocal person, so she's making sure that she can have as much impact as she can. So it is encouraging, isn't it?
It's happening. It really is.
Yeah.
It is. And we're going to do it one mama at a time, one conversation at a time. But I think we will then hit a point where we're really starting to see a change in the way that we do this.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing.
A ripple effect. So, yeah, Kate is her name. I can't remember, but I'll include her episode in the show notes. Yeah. So one thing you touched on was anger. Now, I wanted to bring that up in something that I've read that you've said about anger and the train, that analogy.
Oh, yes,
is that yours? Did you?
It is, yes.
I love it. I love it. So I'll read it out, and then I'll ask for you to explain it a little further. Anger is a stop on the train that we travel on to our final destination of healing and changing how society values motherhood. It is a station we need to pass through in this journey of change. We don't get off the train at the anger station. We stay there, though.
Yes.
Go through and we honour it. I love that. Can you tell us more about why you wrote that and what it means?
That, as I said before, anger was a really big part of my early experience of motherhood. It was a part that I was the most ashamed of and shocked by. I just couldn't believe this anger that would come out of me. And then I pushed that all down to be a good mother. And really in hindsight, I believe that's where I got my thyroid disease from. In hindsight, on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, I believe that this anger that I was holding inside was what actually contributed to my health deteriorating. And it wasn't until I discovered Matrescence and flew to New York City to meet with Doctor Aurelie Athan at Columbia University, who was doing the main research on matrescence in the world. And I sat in her office and started to share with her what I had been through. And I felt this anger coming back, especially once I realized that this wasn't my fault that I had been feeling this way. And I immediately wanted to push that anger back down again. I was terrified of letting this anger come out. I remember saying to her, to Dr. Athan, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be that angry feminist who's out there yelling at everybody. I was so afraid to be that stereotype of that angry feminist. And she was the first one to mention to me about anger as a station we pass through, but we don't get off the train there. But I liked that idea, to be totally honest, but I was terrified about that station. So I then used to say for a long time, it's a station we pass through on our way. I then, since teaching Mama Rising to hundreds of women around the world, and then they teaching Matrescence to their own mamas, I now believe that the train stops at anger for a reason. And I believe we're meant to stay there for a moment. I believe that one of the things that we have done to women in our culture is we have made them afraid of their anger, and we have taught them that it is bad and scary and not okay. And part of this claiming of motherhood to be seen, valued, and supported differently is that we have to find our voice and we have to say, this isn't okay. We have to be able to say when we're angry, it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be just my job. You need to help me. And if we keep, and I did it first too, I was like, that train, okay, I'm on the train and I can see the anger stop, and I'm going to go, shoop, I'm going to go straight through that station. I'm not going to get off that train. I'm going to keep on going. I actually now believe we're meant to get off the train, or even just pause at the train station if that's too scary. But we absolutely have to acknowledge that to fully heal, and claim ourselves through this experience of motherhood. Anger is a part of that. And for many of us, that's really scary, but it's where the healing begins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a feeling that is so human, but it's just not recognized as that way. And it's certainly not recognized for a mother.
No, and it's not accepted.
It's not accepted.
No. And, we could do another podcast episode on that as well about, angry women. You put a group of powerful, angry women together and watch out, world. So you wonder why they took that away.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I think so maybe the last thing I'd like to say on that is that once we get back on the train, or once we decide to move out of that station, we do then get to a place where we can speak clearly and firmly, but not from rage.
Yeah.
We speak firmly from boundaries. We speak firmly from clarity, from strength, from the truth. It's not a reactionary emotional anger. It's a clarity and a certainty and a power. And that's what I love to see in women and in mothers. And that's what, that beautiful story you were sharing about Kate, who has had this experience and found her voice and the understanding of matrescence and support through miscarriage, and to then walk back into a workplace that is so male dominated and say, this is what we need. Like that, she's gone on that train all the way to the end. She has moved through her grief, her anger, her sadness, and she's got to the end, and she can now say it with certainty, with authority. And that's when people listen, and that's when we have real change. So I think that's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Because it's going back to your experience of wanting to do the breech vaginal birth and doing it. You found your voice.
I did.
And I think a lot of the anger is about finding your voice. It's empowering. Yes.
When I think about those first 2 years between Scarlett's birth and Greta's birth, it was 2 years of me silencing myself, because it actually makes my throat tight when I think about it. No wonder I got a thyroid disease. It was this inside. I was like, I wanted to say all of this stuff. I was so scared. I was so angry. I felt so out of control. I was not supported. All the things that I wanted to say, but I kept it quiet because I wanted to be a good girl and a good mother. And it was only through finding my voice with her birth and then slowly finding it in other ways did I end up here. But it doesn't mean we have to rage against the machine and demand the natural birth no matter what. Like if I needed a cesarean in the end, give it to me, whatever I need to keep my baby and myself safe. But I had to find my voice first.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what these beautiful doing postpartum and pregnancy differently allows women to do, is they feel like they've got a say in this again.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's a mum who's suppressing her anger, she's just trying to turn it into other things. She might be saying, I'm just a little frustrated, or I'm a little disappointed today, or feeling a bit sad, because we also often don't want our children to see us in our full spectrum of emotions. But in actual fact, they have to, because it is one of the things that we need to give them permission to do when at times where it's needed. So if a mother is suppressing it or feeling too angry, like she cannot control it, what would you say to that? How can she move through that?
Well, obviously, make sure that she doesn't need to see a therapist or a psychologist, or see if there's any underlying traumas there. Like if this really is, maternal rage is a very serious issue and a very serious, scary thing to feel. So please make sure you find someone to talk to. If it is more manageable for you at the moment than that, for me, I had to find a safe way to feel it in my body and release it. So for me, 8 years ago, I discovered Kundalini yoga, and it changed my life. And every day, I started with 40 days and I ended up every day for like 6 years. I did a 3-minute meditation where I would punch the air for 3 minutes. And I would feel all the feelings and I would move it. And then at the end of the 3 minutes, I would close my eyes and I would sit there and I would just connect with my breath. Those 3 minutes changed my life, probably saved my life in many ways. The other thing, similarly, during COVID, when really big things went down in my family, I started to run. And I pounded that pavement like it was the most angry place in the planet. Like, I'm surprised I still have kneecaps. I was pounding those. For me, moving my anger has not only been about finding my voice, but it is a physical sensation I had to shift. Yeah. Because if I tried to voice it while that was still simmering, it would usually come out the wrong way and in a hurtful way. But if I had punched the air for 3 minutes, I'd gone for a run, I'd put some music on and danced around and just like screamed into a pillow. I've screamed in my car by myself so many times. So I feel that each of us need to find our own way to not only find a safe place to say, I'm angry, I hate this, I don't know if I want to do it anymore, but also find a safe way to feel the emotions and move them.
Yeah, it has to be in some way expressed.
It does.
And learning these safe practices that really do, project it and get it out there and also just not resisting it.
Yeah, I mean, the angry feminine is a very, very powerful energy. I mean, Kali, if you look at the mythology around Kali, the goddess, I mean, she destroys things, but she destroys that which needs to be destroyed. She is the death goddess in a way. Like this energy is very important, very powerful, very healthy. But again, we are not taught how to honor that energy in ourselves at all. We are told to be quiet, and that's scary, and girls don't behave like that. So yeah, for anyone listening, Kundalini yoga, absolutely. And YouTube, just YouTube it. You don't have to go and sign up to, classes just yet. Running, dancing, hip hop, star jumps. I've done star jumps to get that energy. Find a way to move that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really
You're
helpful.
welcome. What a beautiful question.
Great tips. Yeah. So what do you want mothers to know around the world about their worth?
Gosh.
So much. Just a simple question. Not very
I know. I get asked these questions all the time and all the time. And I always just wait for the answer because it's always different. Today, I feel like I want them to know that the world is beginning to see what we do differently. And if it's not felt like that in your world just yet, if you could find comfort and peace and strength in knowing that I do deeply believe that we are shifting back towards a matriarchal society. I do deeply believe we are starting to recognize that what we've been doing doesn't work. And we are beginning, and it may not be in our lifetime, it probably won't be, but we are beginning to turn that around. So if you're feeling completely depleted and invisible and it's impossible to do all of this every day, I hope you feel that that is true. And I'm sorry that it's like that, but we are doing everything we can to make sure that that's going to change for future generations.
Yeah. Yeah, and each individual mum can do something each day to feed that change. Even if it's pushing back on not making dinner 2 nights a week, or I'm going on my walk and it's not negotiable. It's the little things that can add up.
I heard a great suggestion the other day, and I loved this, Katura, where an Australian businesswoman, and I believe she's an author, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, her name's Kate Toon. She was doing an interview and she said she would like every mother to stop doing the grocery shopping after they drop the children off at daycare and instead, or school, and instead do the mothering tasks in front of them. If we want to change how invisible mothering is, then stop doing it when no one else is around. Take the kids to the supermarket, of course, unless they're pains in the ass and screaming and whatever. But I love the way she was saying, and in fact, I'm hoping to get her on my podcast, that we have to stop prioritizing all of this. And then when we finally have our own time doing those motherhood tasks, no. Fold the washing in front of the kids, get them to, take them to the supermarket, even though their eyes are rolling. And I'm like, oh, we're going to go back and get milk. Yeah, because we have to go and get milk every 2 days. That's the way it works. Start showing them what it actually looks like to do this role if we want them to treat it differently. And I loved that advice.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's something that I think we don't even realize we do.
Oh, I'm terrible at that. I rush around and quickly get everything done before school pickup.
Yes. And
so
then
what then? Come home and so he sits on the iPad?
Yeah. We've got the iPad person here too. But I think the family just think all these things magically appear in the cupboard.
That's right.
The washing's magically done, folded up, ready to go. So that, let's start doing that more.
Yes, make the invisible visible.
Yeah.
That's how we'll change it.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Is there anything that you've learned from your mentors and teachers that you'd like to share that's just been very powerful? You've shared a few things, Aurelie Athan, and is there something else you can share with us that really changed the world for you? Your world.
Learning about the masculine and feminine energies has been the other big part of my personal journey and transformation, recognizing how that shows up in the world. So how we value masculine traits of productivity and independence and competition and outward success, as opposed to the feminine traits of collaboration, rest, reciprocity, allowing the natural cycles and seasons of things instead of always being productive Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, no matter what. Recognizing that in myself and then in the world has been life-changing. Yeah. And has really helped me understand why I have found it so hard to slow down and to rest and to let myself and let my body heal, because I was just so deeply living in my masculine energy. And I still do if I'm not careful. It's my modus operandus, or however you say that word. So learning how to value the feminine traits and call on those masculine traits when I need them. Like, we still absolutely need those in our world, but recognizing how to switch one on and switch one off. And for me, that's one of the greatest works of my life, is learning how to honor the feminine energy.
Yeah, and I just want to say that it's clear that that's been a big part of your world, because that's one of the biggest things I've learned from you.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good to hear.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, they do say you teach what you most need to learn, so.
That's it. Yeah, but that's something that I know is very pivotal, and a real takeaway from my training with you with Mama Rising is that I often, I don't know how many times I say this in the week, either in my head or out loud, is rest to rise. We rest to rise.
Mark that one. That's one of the ones that
that's a goodie.
Yeah, one of the ones that seems to have, the other thing is the tattoo on my wrist, which is not going to work for your podcast listeners. Yeah. But there's so many women around the world who was like, that tattoo changed my life, Amy. And wow. I need to trademark the tattoo and the rest. When I rest, I rise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And just no longer, and I'm a bit of a slow learner, because it took me quite a number of years to realize I don't have to be perfect and I don't have to be running the show all the time. But and also just not feeling like it's unproductive to rest, and not needing permission to do it either. Not needing permission to sit that little bit longer with my tea, looking out the window to the beautiful trees we have here, I wouldn't allow myself to do that before. And
no. And the other thing I recognize, which maybe your listeners will see, is that rest was a reward for having finished everything.
Exactly.
That's a core belief of mine that I'm still trying to undo 47 years later.
Yeah.
Is that I will rest when the house is clean and the inbox is empty and I did everything on my list, and then I'm allowed to sit down with that cup of tea. And when I realized that that was the patriarchal way of valuing productivity over rest, and actually if I rested first, I'd still get everything done and I'd do it in a much quicker, happier way. I still have to fight that every day though.
Yeah, it's very ingrained, isn't it?
Very ingrained.
Yeah. I think you sort of get to a point though where you hit such a wall that you think,
oh,
if
absolutely.
I don't rest, then everything's going to fall apart.
And you also get to the point where you realize you never get to the bottom of that to-do list.
You never do. And also no one in the family is going to say, go and have a rest, Mum.
That's right. Exactly. I still catch myself, Katura, apologizing about my house when my kids' friends come over. Oh, sorry about the house. And Scarlett, my eldest, always goes, Mum, they don't even see it. Like, why do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. It's just a leftover from my childhood. My mum always apologized about the state of the house. It was so clean. I grew up in a military family, for goodness sake. But always, oh, sorry about the mess.
Yeah.
Just these habits that we're trying to undo. And it's generational work.
Yeah, that's it. And as you've said, like, stop apologizing. All of these little things are the ways that we can make shifts. Stop apologizing that, oh, sorry, I didn't realize didn't see you in the playground.
I know.
Oh,
sorry, I didn't get back to you.
Yeah. So there's a lot to learn, but it's really, really worth it.
Oh, and
listening to your body and self-acceptance and self-compassion as you would show your little girl that you are inside and any other mother you'd meet, you show yourself the same.
Exactly.
Yeah. So please tell our listeners about your training, because it's absolutely phenomenal. It is an experience that has just as much impact on you as a person as it does on working professionally in this space. So
thank you. I know that's one of the biggest feedbacks we get is I didn't realize how profound a personal experience it would be. So Mama Rising is the International Coaching Federation recognized Matrescence coaching training that I run. So it's a combination of history, research and insights into matrescence. So how the brain changes, how our culture treats mothers, feminism, workplace, birthing experiences, all of that sort of specific motherhood studies, married with coaching skills and tools that are both the general coaching skills and tools that the ICF recognise, plus matrescence-focused coaching skills. Because one of the biggest things I found when I became a life coach and went out and started to coach mothers was that coaching, again, is a very goal-orientated task. It's a very goal-orientated industry. That's where it came from. I mean, you think of coaching, you think of Tony Robbins. It's that you want to lose 10 kilos, let's go. It's got that real energy around it. And I mean, I think everybody on the planet should have a coach like they have a dentist. It's just something that is a fantastic life skill and an amazing person to have next to you. It's not a therapist. They're not there to go backwards and look at why this happened and how you ended up here. They start where you are right now and look at who you want to become and work with you to become that. But what I found when I was working with mums is, how can you ask a mother on the first session, who do you want to be and what are your goals? Because she doesn't know who she is anymore. And when you ask her in that first session, who do you want to be and what are your goals? She will choose who she used to be.
Yes.
She will say, I want to go back to that version of myself. That's what I wanted. And that's what everybody wants, some version of that, like a better version.
Yeah.
But they don't know who they want to be yet because they don't know who they are yet. So what we've done in Mama Rising is combined all of that in the cauldron, almost mixed it around. And we now have a training that allows you to understand matrescence and motherhood studies, coaching skills, and how to work with the mother from the very point of who am I now, and then who do I want to become? So that's what we do. We run it twice a year. It's a 6-month training program, all online, and we run the training September and March every year.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Even actually making a modality and a discipline of matrescence is huge.
Yeah. It's
a huge breakthrough, and it's very exciting.
It is really amazing. And I worked with Doctor Aurelie Athan at Columbia with that. We've got so many amazing teachers and experts. Some of them you've had on your podcast already. It's a beautiful feminine way of learning and sharing this, because there's collaboration. We're all supporting each other. We're all out there doing this together, because it's the only way we're going to change this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for doing the work that you do. We need
and to you. Thank you for doing the work that you do.
Yeah. We're all trying to do our little part, aren't
We're doing this together. Well, it's the only way. It's the only way. It's going to be a ripple effect. And just like we said before, you teach what you most need to learn. The greatest changes in history have started with those who are most affected. Changes always come from the oppressed first.
Yes.
So I do believe, unfortunately, the change will come from the mothers first and then the rest. But this is what you and I are doing. We're the ones. We are the ones who are starting this, and every mother can start this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And as you've said, when mothers get together and
watch out, world.
Yeah, watch out.
Yes, that's what they've always been afraid of, Katura.
I know. Things about
Here we come.
Earthquake is coming.
That's right. Exactly. Watch us rise.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, and congratulations on what you're doing in this beautiful podcast.
Oh, thank you for being part of it. I'm very honored.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Beautiful.
All right.
Thank you.
All the information will be in the show notes of your training and how someone can get in touch with you. Look forward to chatting with you another time.
Thank you. Beautiful.
All right.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode and that it offered something helpful to your own mothering experience. If you are a pregnant woman or know someone who is, head over to my website to receive your free copy of the postpartum checklist and contact list. And if you'd like to be better prepared for your postpartum, both practically and mentally, purchase the Peaceful Postpartum ebook, a 52-page interactive guide on what you need to know and what matters most in postpartum. And so that we can get these conversations out to more mothers, I'd be grateful if you could like, share, and review this podcast, and we'll see you next time.